Welcome to this afternoon's American Security Project webinar. This is an on-the-record conversation that will be available for attribution. A recording of this conversation will be posted on our website. All audience members will be muted during the discussion, but please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions to the panelists. With that, Jessica, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this very important and timely discussion on clean energy. We are not covering fusion today, but instead we are going to talk all things hydrogen. This is our second in a series of Innovating Out of the Climate Crisis programs designed to focus on innovations, challenges, and opportunities in 5 clean energy areas. For today's discussion, I am pleased to welcome our 3 expert panelists who can walk us through what is happening in the sector. So first, from Allegheny Science and Technology, we have Ms. Arria Hines. Arria is an accomplished mentor, serial entrepreneur, and trusted advisor and fellow native West Virginian. Since the establishment of AST in 2009, she has been a driving force behind the growth, strategy, and operational success for the entire organization. She is an inspiring example for CEOs throughout West Virginia and the United States. Arria, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jessica, and thanks for inviting me to be a guest today on ASP. I really appreciate it. What an unprecedented time. So I'm Arria Hines, as she said. I'm the CEO of AST. We are all of the above energy company. Truly, we are. We work across a lot of energy sectors. We work in the nuclear energy, we work in clean, sustainable energy, and across all of those technology areas. And we've been working in those since 2010 across those. We work in the DOE space. We also work alongside a lot of our commercial clients that also work in the fossil energy space. So we're really excited about the opportunities here with hydrogen and the future of what that's going to bring. So I appreciate an opportunity to talk about that today.
Thank you so much. We are looking forward to hearing all things about the Hydrogen Hub and the West Virginia process. So more to follow on that. But from now, I'd like to welcome from FTI Consulting, Ivana Jemelkova, the Senior Managing Director, Energy Transition and Sustainability at FTI Consulting. Ivana is an award-winning strategic communications advisor to high-profile clients facing complex, multi-jurisdictional challenges on the road to net zero. Ivana, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm so excited to be here and share the floor with Arria and Emily. It doesn't happen very often in this industry that we have an all-female panel, so thank you and congratulations to the team for putting it together. I'm indeed with FTI Consulting, a global business advisory firm with about 7,000 people across 30 different countries globally and a large energy and natural resources team. And at the expense of sounding like a hydrogen dinosaur, I'll make a confession. I have been working on this topic for more than 10 years. And obviously, we started long before hydrogen was a hot topic. And we have seen the industry go through various ups and downs. So let's put it that way. And what I can say, there's really never been more momentum than today. We have experienced from dozens of engagements across the value chain and have really seen the topic go mainstream and have learned through various coalitions and efforts that we have built, the importance of continuous education, partnerships, and really driving the conversation from why to how. And I think we will focus on that a lot today. So with that, I'll look forward to the conversation.
Great, thank you so much. And finally with us today from the Clean Air Task Force, we have the U.S. Director of Zero Carbon Fuels, Ms. Emily Kent. Emily joined the Clean Air Task Force in 2021, and she leads their work in the U.S. on public policy, communication, and education, as well as technology and business innovation for zero carbon fuels, namely hydrogen and ammonia. Emily, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and it's great to be here with all of you and agreed on the wonderful view of an all-woman panel. As Jessica mentioned, my name is Emily Kent. I'm with Clean Air Task Force. I've been with CATF for a little over a year now, working on zero carbon fuels, which for us is mainly hydrogen and ammonia. For those of you who don't know us, CATF is a small global nonprofit that focuses on pursuing the options that we need to get to full decarbonization by mid-century in a world that has growing energy needs. And so CATF has programs across a variety of different technology areas and cross-cutting issues like, communications, policy, analysis, super hot rock geothermal, nuclear, carbon capture, and then mine, of course, which is on zero carbon fuels. And our premise for zero carbon fuels is that while electrification and a vast build out of renewables will do a lot of the work towards decarbonization, today about 80% of our final end use energy is in the form of fuels, and it's unlikely that all of that will be able to be decarbonized by being electrified. And so there are a whole set of sectors that are hard to electrify. We will need other options, namely either zero carbon fuels or some other type of decarbonized energy. So that's why CATF and my team work on zero carbon fuels. We work across the whole value chain of hydrogen from production and thinking about how to make hydrogen in the lowest carbon intensity ways through to end use and what kinds of sectors might need it to decarbonize. We've done a lot of work in the past year or two on policy, mainly at the federal level. So happy to get into more on things like hydrogen hubs and the hydrogen tax credit that have passed in the past year. But I will pause there and looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you all. I will, as usual, try to weave in questions from the audience and we'll go from there. So first, let's just start with the basics. And Ivana, I will pitch this to you and anyone can comment as well. But hydrogen is plentiful. It's the most abundant chemical element in nature, but it's also at this point really expensive to generate and requires a great deal of energy to produce. So why do you think now is the time? Why are you so excited at this point in time by what you've seen at the start of your hydrogen journey?
Great question, and it's a big question. So let me keep it simple to a few key points, and I'll build on what Emily just laid out. If we want to tackle the enormous challenge of climate change, we need all hands on deck. No discussion. We need all technologies, all innovations that we can get. And there are simply areas in the energy system that require green molecules, clean fuels, and hydrogen really has a critical and unique role to play in helping us reach those parts of the energy system. And perhaps for a little background, hydrogen is not an energy source. It's very similar to electricity in that it is an energy carrier. So I will oversimplify just for the sake of the argument. We'll take any primary energy source that we have available, clean, cheap, abundant, secure, ideally, right? And we'll turn it into a carrier. Electrons on wires or molecules in the form of gases or liquids that we can put into pipelines or tanks and otherwise transport to where we need it. And that's exactly hydrogen. It can help us leverage any kind of primary energy source and help us get it to the demand points, to where it is needed, and add additional flexibility, right? Electricity does a lot of that, but it cannot reach all parts of the system. So hydrogen allows us to actually complement where we can electrify directly and bring clean energy to where only fuels can go. And what makes me really excited about what's happening right now is this enormous momentum around government and political and policy support for hydrogen. We're realizing that the challenge of climate change and the many other challenges we're facing in the energy system are so enormous that we truly need to get going. We need to get moving. And just over the last 2 years or so, dozens of governments have put in place entirely new dedicated hydrogen strategies, many of which with funding. And that is a game changer. We're not talking single millions or hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands for basic R&D. We're really talking literally billions and tens of billions for deployment, and that is a huge difference. And obviously all of the policy and regulatory discussions that come with those or follow from those strategies reshape the environment, right? They de-risk, they help us create more certainty, more predictability, so we know where the industry is going. Suddenly we have a framework, we have this incredible flow of funding and financing into the system. That is a completely different picture than, say, even 2 or 3 years ago. And I just want to be really clear, there really isn't a time to overhype here or cheer, because it's not yet done. It's in fact nowhere near done and dusted. We have literally just moved from, as I said earlier, from the question of why hydrogen, now most people get it, to exactly how. So we know there will be 8 billion, 7 billion for hydrogen hubs, but how will that money be dispersed and how will that deployment happen? We know there will be tax credits, which on paper seem fantastic, very attractive, but how exactly will they be rolled out? So really, these are the granular questions that we're grappling with right now. But in fact, I think that's a good news, because we're no longer pitching, hydrogen and trying to figure out why hydrogen. We're talking about, what do we do next? Concrete action.
Yeah, so since we're on the government action, let's just go ahead and get right into it, right? So DOE has set aside a huge amount of funding for these hydrogen hubs. So can you talk, Arria, maybe you can talk about it since you've been part of the West Virginia coalition that's putting together a bid for one of those hydrogen hubs. Can you talk about that process, what it's been like, timelines? What do we expect to see in the next couple of years?
So yeah, thank you. Yes, I can talk about that. So yes, so the West Virginia Clean Hydrogen Coalition actually came together back in February. The RFI was released, and so actually Senator Manchin, Senator Capito, Governor Justice, and Congressman McKinley responded to it as the West Virginia Clean Hydrogen Coalition. In that time and space, up from the time the RFI was responded to, we started working together, to bring together a team in Appalachia to put together, a pursuit for the hub. We actually held an industry day in July in Charleston, West Virginia. And I got to tell you, Jessica, the turnout and the interest was overwhelming all across industry. It was really exciting to see how quickly we pulled that together. And we had over 200 attendees in a very short amount of time. And the company, we met with several companies, large businesses who are interested in pursuit. And believe it or not, a lot of these commercial businesses are already developing their own projects. They have, they are moving forward with the technology, and they see this opportunity that the DOE is putting forth as, wow, we can expedite this process, right? And then coming on board with the 50% cost share, that's a big hurdle for a lot of companies. But believe it or not, when you bring a lot of these businesses, large and medium tiered businesses together, you can move the ball forward pretty quickly. So what we've done then is we formed a team, and it's actually Battel's leading the effort as the prime, but we have GTI, AST, we have EQT, we have a lot of other companies. We have the state of West Virginia. We've also just recently got support from Ohio, and we have support from Kentucky, and we're focusing on Southwestern PA. So this is really an unprecedented time. So for us, the timeline is we've submitted a concept paper. Ours is called ARCH2. That's the team we have, the Appalachian Regional Clean Hydrogen Hub. And we're really encompassing all those counties that are in that central region of Appalachia, okay? One of the things to think, we are one of the second largest natural gas producing regions, in the area or in the region in the United States. But an interesting tidbit is if that region was a nation of its own, we would be the fourth largest nation of natural gas producers in the world. So it's a pretty cool, stat when you think about how small that area is, but yet the natural gas that is produced there. So the blue hydrogen is what we're pursuing, and we've submitted the concept paper, and we're pushing forward with the application. Right now, DOE is on a timeline to give no-goes and no-goes by the end of this year. We haven't received any information back at this point in time. And then the full application, according to the schedule, is due April 7th. Of 2023. So then if you just kind of back into the numbers, if DOE stays on track, we possibly could get, an award by probably, October or November of next year. So conceivably the hubs could start development, could start coming online in phase one in the end of next year in 2023. So when you think about it, that's moving pretty fast, in the world of the energy technology development sector. And just to keep in mind, the development of hydrogen itself doesn't generate emissions. It's actually the production of the hydrogen. So that's what, we're looking in the technology world to mitigate. It's the carbon sequestration that's going to be required. And so, I think it's an unprecedented time, with these regional clean energy hubs that can be established. And at the end of the day, we've gotten a lot of comments of people saying, well, so where are you going to build this? Well, it's actually a concept of a lot of different projects, right? In our hub, we have green projects, green hydrogen, we have blue hydrogen. And the idea is at some point, in the future, they're all going to integrate, right? And provide a network of clean hydrogen. And so we think we're positioned in a great position to pursue this with the technologies and the companies that we built. We have over 150 team members, on our current team. So it's an exciting time for West Virginia and this region.
Absolutely. And you brought up something that I wanted to come back to because it triggered something in my mind from a previous conversation that we had. And Ivana, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. One of the things that you said is that when we talked about the colors of hydrogen, right? When we talk about blue hydrogen or green hydrogen, and you said we need to learn them and then you unlearn them. Can you talk us through that and what that means and why those distinctions are important?
Thank you, Jessica. I'm happy to be put on the spot. This is a question that comes up in every hydrogen conversation. So we have started using colors to refer to hydrogen made from certain primary sources and with certain methods. It's kind of like a shorthand, right? I say blue hydrogen, and I mean hydrogen made, from natural gas with carbon treatment. Or I say green hydrogen, and I kind of mean, hydrogen made with renewables through the process of electrolysis. Now, the trouble is that not green hydrogen is created equal, and not all blue hydrogen is created equal. And when you start getting into these conversations, right, what is the carbon intensity of one or the other? Should we be pursuing incentivizing one or the other? You discover that actually there isn't a standard, there isn't a definition, there isn't some kind of a, all right, if I say it's green hydrogen, I actually really granularly mean this. So the carbon intensity of hydrogen really differs, and it differs at project level, not method level. And that's really important. And that's why this push to, let's forget the colors. They served a purpose for a while, and, we can still use them in a sophisticated conversation, but let's pivot quickly to what we actually mean. So the carbon intensity of that given production process. And as I said, that needs to be measured at project level. Not all carbon treatment is equally effective. Not all renewable or not all electricity inputs are the same. There's a huge discussion happening around, can you offset? Do you need to match? Do you need to provide additionality? I mean, what does that even look? So it's a much more nuanced and much more sophisticated conversation. And frankly, it creates a whole level of sort of confusion and sort of this emotion in the debate. And frankly, really, if our target is decarbonization, then we really need to focus on the carbon footprint. And our goal is clean, cheap, secure hydrogen at scale ASAP, because we have a big job to do. So, the colors are an interesting facet to all of this. I don't believe that any other energy carriers are subject to this conversation. Well, we could be certainly discussing that too. I think in our prep conversation, we talked about the composition of our electricity here in Washington, D.C. And if I were to speak hydrogenish for a while, I would say that 1/3 of my electricity is black, 1/3 of my electricity is pink, 1/3 of it is gray, and there's a very little tiny bit of green. And I'm also kind of pretending that it is there because I'm buying offsets. So, let's move away from that. It's not serving anyone, and it's just creating division and confusion.
That's fair. So Emily, I want to bring you in at this point to talk more about the policy side. Do you see those color distinctions in some of the policies that's been proposed, or are you seeing that we're just talking about hydrogen writ large? How should we be talking about it at the policy level?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great question. And to be honest, I think it shows up more in the public discussion and the media, where they are a useful shorthand, even if they don't necessarily always mean anything useful. In the policy discussion, I think folks actually did a really good job over the past year or two of directing the conversation towards the carbon intensity and away from the colors. So you'll see in the hubs and the tax credit language that, the requirements and the guidelines in there are focused on actual carbon intensity thresholds. And those are feasible to meet, from any kind of hydrogen production, depending on what kinds of project level decisions you're making. So I think that was, a really beneficial direction for those policies to go. The tax credit in particular is a pay for performance scheme where you get more funding for the lower carbon intensity. I think that's a fantastic way for us to be incentivizing the right kind of hydrogen production.
Excellent. That's positive news. A lot of time when we talk about clean energy or the energy transition, it's all sort of doom and gloom. So it's good to hear something positive. So with hydrogen, it's been proposed as a fuel from everything from hard steel manufacturing and hard to abate sectors to heavy trucking and home heating. What do you, Emily, I'll give it to you first, but anybody else is welcome to jump in. What do you see as the most promising role for hydrogen going forward?
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned in my intro, I think, the areas where we at CATF would be most excited for hydrogen use are the ones that don't have great decarbonization alternatives, in particular, the ones that are hard to electrify. So, the two areas that come to mind most frequently are heavy industry and heavy transportation. I will say early on, as this industry gets up and running, some of the clean hydrogen might be going towards decarbonizing existing uses of hydrogen. So, we mentioned things like ammonia for fertilizer, the ways that it's used in industry already in refineries. Not all of that can be decarbonized just by swapping out new types of production because there are byproducts, but, where possible, that's a great start. I think after that, you get into things like heavy duty long haul trucking, where hydrogen fuel cell trucks are a really promising solution for that particular segment of heavy duty industry and transportation. You can look at things like marine shipping and transoceanic shipping, which, hydrogen and ammonia could potentially be a great solution for. Power balancing also is a useful one. If we're looking at a grid that's dominated by intermittent renewable resources, hydrogen can provide some, firm capacity for that grid. And then, further down the line, something like aviation as well could be.
Excellent. We've got a question here that, since we haven't talked about it, we sort of jumped around it. Can any of you explain the state of the art from a scientific perspective? What happens and what has been done in the hydrogen space? No, none of you are scientists or engineers, so I
wanted to give the floor to Arria in case she wants to talk about the business and the commercials, but it really depends on which part of the hydrogen equation you want to focus on: the state of play of electrolyzer technology, the state of play of sort of the build out that's required for the inputs, the state of play of the carbon capture technology, the state of play of fuel cells, right? There's so many components in all of this, and we've seen tremendous increase in efficiency, decrease in costs. I mean, we're really working through the scale up curve, if you will, and you will find many similarities with where solar and wind were, say, 20, 30 years ago. Really, the technology becoming more efficient, more durable, more easily available, many more manufacturers and players entering the space. So, we're really at that very exciting moment of inflection. And, I'm not a scientist indeed, but happy to point you to resources and literature on the various components. And I don't know if Arria wanted to jump in on the business and the commercials, why that is, why hydrogen is getting to the point where it's becoming attractive, right?
Yeah, Ivana, I can just add to that. So yes, the reason it's really becoming attractive in the it does require all the technologies to advance. Okay, it's not just one single arena that we're focused on with the hydrogen, but when you go back and you look, I mean, the reason that it's really interesting and appealing to industry right now is because the government is, if you look at international, and I know Ivana can speak much more to this than I can, but they are ahead of us. Things are moving a little faster there and have been for many years. We are now, and our government has now moved us forward with the IRA amendment, with the 45Q tax credit increases, those type of things. When you combine all of those things, when you start getting the tax credits and they get directly to the companies that are developing the technologies, right? The things that are happening, the carbon sequestration, that they can actually get a credit that can actually put cash back in their pocket. When you start putting all of these things, connecting all of these things, all of a sudden industry innovation starts taking off. And that's where I think, there's no one specific area. What we're seeing when we're talking to industry, in the hydrogen hub pursuit is it's so interesting how many different approaches that different companies are taking to the pursuit of utilizing hydrogen. And the other thing, we have to think about is the transportation of it, getting it to the sources, to the fueling stations and stuff. That's also being worked on. So it's kind of it's a puzzle, but all the pieces are now have an opportunity. The pieces are now in place. Before we were missing pieces. Does that kind of answer your question? Or Emily, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think it's a huge question. We could easily spend a whole talk on it. I think, one thing to add from the policy side is that the policies we've seen pass in the past year or two, I mean, we've already had a lot of R&D go into this space, and that's going to continue, and it's necessary for some of the, future innovations that we need. The Hubs program is a, demonstration program. So the idea there is to be demonstrating first, second, third of a kind technology projects, across the value chain of hydrogen. And then the tax credit is a deployment policy. So trying to really get clean hydrogen out the door, which, I think is just sort of helpful for where we are, hopefully in the next 10 years or so, we have significant deployment of this kind of energy.
And I would say, don't take our word for it. Go to the website of the International Energy Agency and download their most recent technology roadmap. It's brilliant. It really talks about the different steps, where we are in terms of, the maturity of the technology. And on top of that, they also track deployment. So they track large-scale hydrogen projects. There are a couple of organizations. You can go to the Hydrogen Council if you want a first-hand industry perspective. You can go to the IEA if you want something perhaps a bit more sort of, big picture and so on. So there are a number of organizations looking at this, and you will get a really good sense really quickly of how the map is filling up and how new projects are popping up and the scale, right? Previously, we would be looking at kilowatt. Now we're at the megawatt, we're going into the gigawatt. Big projects have been announced. So you will get a sense of that really, really quickly and from, much more informed, truly science-based voices.
I was not meaning to insult you all by pointing out that nobody's a scientist. Yeah. So green hydrogen since we're on the policy aspect of it, green hydrogen was a feature of several pledges during COP26. The UN launched the Green Hydrogen Catapult. We've talked about the IRA and the BIL, and we didn't mention it, but the Defense Production Act also provides resources for producing electrolyzers, which of course is needed. Are there any gaps that you see? What would you like to see more of at the policy level, either state, federal, international? Have you seen policies that are working really, really well, or things that are being done that we should also be thinking about as either individual citizens or local governments or federal government?
I can jump in here with an idea, and then I'm sure Ivana and Arria have others, but one area that I think, has gotten some support, but it still needs a lot of work over the coming years, is really developing the new end use sectors and making sure that there are off-taker markets ready to consume this hydrogen. And so, some of that gets back to the last question on sort of where we are in the technology development. I think they're sort of all in a different place along that process. Some of them are ready to go today. Some of them might need a few years, and some of them might need a decade or two to be really consuming significant amounts of clean hydrogen. But I think that's an area where, some more targeted policy support at the federal or the state level would be, hugely beneficial. We've seen in other countries like the UK that they're looking at things like contracts for differences as a way to sort of bridge that gap in costs and get those markets up and running. So I think that's something that could be really interesting in the US.
And I would just add on to the point on demand. we're not necessarily talking about lack of demand eventually. I'll illustrate with an example. For example, the International Air Transport Association, IATA, just came out with their vision for the future of aviation. And they predict that we will need around 600 megaton or millions of ton of hydrogen by mid-century. Let's compare it with what we're producing today. It's about 100. So we're talking 6 times more hydrogen just for this one specific application. So the problem is not necessarily the volume at the end of it. The problem is the matching, right? The demand and supply, and how do we incentivize someone to start producing so that someone else can start consuming, but it may not be in the immediate. So there are different ways, as you alluded, Emily, to sort of help with the matching and kind of crossing the time and space that sometimes, you know, we have a bit of a gap. Another great example, which takes us to the context of global hydrogen trade, is H2 Global. H2 Global, you must have seen that name. It's a mechanism that basically allows the German government and other governments which may participate eventually to sort of procure hydrogen, ammonia, and derivatives at scale, and then sort of sell them, you know, at the appropriate price to the demand side, so to the consumers, if you will. So I think that's a really interesting one, and you know, it allows us to overcome the famous chicken and egg, and rather, you know, goodness, I was in this in a great event in Brussels recently, and we talked about how it's not a chicken and egg, but it's more of a synchronized swimming. So we kind of all need to jump into the pool at the same time, and you know, somehow make it look good and make it work together. But it's important that we sort of embark on the journey and really try to do what we can. And you know, there are things that can be controlled and that can be accelerated, but then there is also, you know, some of the foundational stuff, such as project development, right? How long does it take you to get a permit to develop a renewable project so that you can use that energy to either electrify directly and or use some of that primary source to generate hydrogen to then deliver it to your end use. So, you know, they're just some, let's say, commercial, political, physical, chemical, you know, sort of considerations along the way. And one of the things that I think is, you know, is a really important one, and that was also part of the COP conversation, is accelerating permitting and just getting the projects built. People love clean energy. Not everyone loves clean energy infrastructure. It's hard to get it built, but we need it. If we want more renewables in the system, we need to develop more renewable projects. So accelerate permitting, you know, be really upfront about things like environmental justice, community engagement, get these things right so that we can really benefit from you know, a larger share of renewables and larger share of clean energy in the energy system.
Yeah, and I think one of the thank you so much for those comments. One of the important parts of all of this, of course, is the public support for these projects. So Arria, maybe you can talk a little bit more about how West Virginians in the Appalachian region have received news of the hydrogen hub bid and how that's been received and how you've been able to garner more support in the area for those projects.
Yes, of course, Jessica. So just to start off here, you know, we're just wading into this, right? And we've just started. We've been doing community engagement, outreach. We've started that back, you know, back in the summer. It's what's very interesting in the Appalachian region is, you know, it's the education process, right? There's a lot of questions. What is this? You know, everyone says, I don't want another pipeline in my backyard, you know, kind of thing. So there's a lot of questions about what the impact is going to be. What does this mean for the future? I mean, we come from a coal region, you know, there's still a need for coal, right? There's needs for all of the above energy at the moment. This is not something that's going to change overnight. So the thing is, we've gotten a really positive reception of, we want to learn more. We want to understand, right? And at the end of the day, what I think is really great in the Clean Hydrogen Hub pursuits is they are coupling the technology with the community benefits, with the Justice 40. You know, they are wanting to see a 40% impact, not 40% of the dollars that if you win one of these applications, one of these hubs going out, but they want to see a 40% impact, which now all of a sudden makes industry, makes the you know, AST and all the companies that are pursuing this we have to step back and we have to figure out what are the metrics, what does the community need, and how can this, the movement and the hydrogen hub and bringing hydrogen, developing clean hydrogen, how is that going to make a positive impact into the communities? And you think about it, it's a whole new generation. It's a different technology. We're going to need different types of training. We're going to need a much broader base of industry, of skilled workers, right? That's going to have to build a lot of these projects, and at the end of the day, the big challenge too is the timeline, right? It's very hard to keep the momentum and keep the communities and everyone, all the boots on the ground, excited about this when this is a 10 to 12 year span. If you look at the actual hub development, across the FOA space, and as Emily mentioned too, it is a demonstration project, right? Not all the projects that every applicant proposes will go live, will become developed. There's a proof of concept here that has to happen, right? Because we submitted a concept paper, it literally had concepts in it. We haven't done all of this, technical assessments and everything that needs to be done to complete that. But back to your question, we have gotten a lot of really positive interest, right? Wanting to understand, wanting to know what can we do, right, to help move this along, which is great. And to what Ivana said is really important is the permitting process. We do have to streamline that. I come back to, we all know the permitting process is there to protect our environment. It's for the safety and the regulations, right? And everything we're doing is really to sustain our environment, right? Everything we're doing here. But again, you can't keep momentum, if the permitting and the technologies change so quickly and evolve so quickly that if the permitting processes take, 3 years, it all of a sudden, everything that you've planned has changed, right? Because it's constantly changing. So we're getting a lot of positive interest. We are really going to be doing a lot of outreach. And when I talk about outreach, I'm talking about engagement, actual engagement with the communities and finding out what they need and what, with the projects, there's regions that they're in and looking at how that is going to make the impact across the region. And I do believe, and this is one of the things I think is so important with everything, is a rising tide raises all ships, right? If we can get, some of the hydrogen technology off the ground into reality, so many other things will also come along with it. So I think that's the excitement that's building with this.
That's fantastic. And I love to end on such a positive note. Somehow we only have about 4 minutes left. So I want to give you each, a minute and a half to tell us what you're most excited for in 2023. What should we be keeping an eye on in this space?
Can I not deliver on that assignment and use my time?
Yes, you can. I'll allow it.
Excited to see an all-female panel. I wanted to do a quick plug for a group called Women in Green Hydrogen or Women in Hydrogen. Arria put it so well. We need all available talent to address the enormous challenges ahead of us. And today we're nowhere near that. And in terms of the diversity and richness of thinking and ideas around the table. And there is this fantastic group called Women in Green Hydrogen, of which we are a proud partner that is focused on connecting and empowering women in the space. And, it often starts with the gender question, but it moves very quickly into race and background and various other aspects of diversity. They have an incredible database with literally hundreds of female experts active in hydrogen. So check it out if you need speakers, experts, input for your research, your panels, your events. And they have a super active LinkedIn group, opportunities, a board with all sorts of interest and content. So definitely do check them out. And there's another group here in the United States, sort of a sister organization that is very informal, that comes together for monthly calls. And it's just such a wonderful place. So for anyone out there watching and, interested in learning more, please be in touch. It's a very warm, welcoming place, and we'd be delighted to have you. So I dedicate my time to women in hydrogen.
That's fair. Let's just say you're excited to see where that goes in 2023. There you go. Emily, over to you.
Sure, that is a little hard to follow. But I will say, I mean, I think something that we've all touched on a little bit today is optionality in hydrogen. And optionality is a really key core value of CATF in dealing with climate change and in hydrogen production itself as well. We think of it as a risk mitigation tool. And a way to say, you know, if we don't know what the future will look like, we want to keep doors open and make sure that if, you know, some doors close, we still have pathways that can get us to where we need to be. So I think I'm really excited in the next year or a few years to see that optionality, I think, actually come to light in hydrogen production and see it, you know, produced in all the different ways we've talked about, but, you know, also produced from things like nuclear or, you know, super hot rock geothermal, and, you know, that we could see new innovations in using that whole suite of options.
Excellent. Sorry about that. Arria, I give you the last word. You've got 1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute. Okay. So make it quick. So I'm excited in 2023 about the ARCH2 hydrogen, clean hydrogen hub pursuit, and really the impact that we're going to make and the network on environmental justice, you know, equity, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, because it's really important, you know, in the Appalachian region where West Virginia, you know, there are so many disadvantaged communities. I still live in one. Okay. I grew up here. I believe in moving the state forward, and I want to see, and what I'm excited about is we are at the very opening of hydrogen in the Appalachian region. And you know what? I want to be talking here, you know, a few years down the road as we get into the phases of this development of, hey, the Appalachian region is not just leading now in the natural gas, you know, development. We're leading in hydrogen and the clean energy and all the industry that's going to come with that, the end users that will come, because at the end of the day, it is real. We know it's real. We can see it. Now it's just creating it. So I'm just really excited about the opportunities that we have with this unprecedented time.
That's incredible. And thank you all so much for being here with us today. We will definitely have to do this again on World Hydrogen Day in October 2023 and look
Absolutely.
back at what we've accomplished in
That
those
would be
intervening months. So everyone, thank you for joining us today. If I didn't get to your question, I'm very sorry. Feel free to email me or email any one of our panelists, and we will try to get you an answer. But with that, I say good night and happy holidays.
Thanks.